Thanks for tuning in to this month's article. I'm Dustin Lucas, and today I'm going to be talking about down and dirty creative editing using Lightroom Classic and Photoshop. So my workflow typically starts in Lightroom Classic. Of course, I love using presets, profiles. Those are usually the starting point to most of my edits. But I also like using my local adjustments, seeking settings in Lightroom. Being able to move through images fast is so important for my workflow. When it comes to creative editing, I'm always pushing quality, but I have to be able to edit faster, right? So that's the goal here. Day after a session, I want to give the client some sneak peeks. I want to get some leading indicators for my IPS session. I'm going to do some sneak peeks. I'm going to pick out some of my favorite images, do some quick edits just to see how excited my clients get. So I want to make sure, whether we're looking at this experience for the clients or this opportunity for sales, it's got to scale, right? If it can't scale, how can you deliver this to every client? How can you scale your business? How can you make more money, right? So focus on generating more revenue, saving time, of course, right? Outsourcing edits is definitely going to be a huge help to something like that as well. But if you're doing the sneak peeks yourself, if it's something that you want to control, right? We're creatives, we're crazy, we always want to have that control. I think it's important to know how to edit fast, and that's what we're going to go through here. So, there's a dozen ways to edit photos in Lightroom, but here's how I really like to use Lightroom and Photoshop together. So with Lightroom, it's going to be presets, profiles, local adjustments, all the kind of stuff that maybe you're used to, but how to use those tools very specifically, right? To take an image here on the right out of camera and get something dialed in on the left here. It's with actions, presets, profiles, all these things I'm using for quick click applying. It's pretty awesome. So next, I'm going to Photoshop for some more complex stuff. So my dodge and burn technique, which I'll show you how I use that, using the subject select tool, using curves layers, things like that, saving actions, right? At the end of the day, you want to be creating as much efficiency as you can in your editing, but you still want quality to be there, right? So you still want to have a non-destructive workflow so you can go back after an action's applied, tweak the settings, get your image ready. And of course, if it gets purchased, you probably want to spend a little more time on it. But if I'm showing it on a television screen, if I'm posting it as a quick edit just for the clients to see, I'm not going to spend that much time on it, but I can still apply cool creative effects. So let's jump into Lightroom, profiles, and local adjustments. So here we go. Starting out in Lightroom, right, I can have presets applied, profiles, all of those things that are going to make my workflow very fast, right? So I have a few different, right, presets here that have different profiles already built, things like that. But let's dive into where it all starts, and that's profiles, right? What are profiles? You might notice here at the top of your basic panel, you're going to see this Adobe color. Typically, I change it from Adobe Color, no matter what camera I'm using, just to find something better. Um, Instead of kind of going through how to build a custom profile and more extensively how to make them, right? I have previous articles where I've covered that kind of stuff. So in this tutorial, right, I want to focus on just applying a profile, a custom one that I made, right? So you can see the huge difference in shifts. It's applied this kind of a matte style to it. It's a warming filter. It automatically transforms my image from the left out of camera to something a little more creative. Now, taking that a step further, right, we can brighten this up. We can start to open up the shadows. We can drop the highlights down, right? We can do all this kind of editing here in Lightroom pretty quickly. Now, instead of going down that route, what I like to do is if I'm pretty happy overall with the exposure, let's just say, let's set it there. Um, and if maybe we want to take the highlights down a little bit. So what I like to do is use the radial filter. Once I apply these settings here, just to kind of do a simple correction, nothing too crazy. But what I can do is hold Shift and hit the M key, and that's going to open up my radial filter. So it's going to give us a little crosshair here, and where I click, it's going to make us like a little oval. So what I want to do is I want to make this a little bit bigger, right? So what this is doing, right, if we toggle this on and off, it's already applying the radial filter outside of this circle. So you see if I hover over here, I'm going to hit the O key, it's going to show you in red where the effect is going to go, and I can adjust these things down to 0 here. And what I can do is I can start to manipulate this mask that I'm creating here by making it larger. I can also drag it down, but can also mess with the feathering, right? So I can have it feather further in, feather further out, right? All these little things just as a quick kind of in the middle process. Now hitting the O key, turn that back off. Now what I want to do is I want to burn down the background, right? If I want to make the background darker, if I feel like brightening it up for the clients here, I need to, right, recover some of that. So what I'm going to do is clicked on my radial filter here. It's going to drop the exposure down. As you'll notice, if we take it all the way down, right, that just looks terrible. But you can kind of see where the effect is going, where it's being applied and where it's not. So we can burn down the background, right? Once we kind of dial that in, turn this on again. Kind of make sure we're not going over our client too much. Kind of bring that out a little bit more. Feather a little bit. So let's go back here into our actual edit. So back into the radial filter. Now, what I want to make sure we can do, right, before and after, is we can right click and duplicate this. What is cool about that, and I'm just going to kind of move it over here just a little bit so we can see both of our pins, right? So we can access both pins. Now this duplicated filter, I'm going to go ahead and invert, because now I want to take that and I want to dodge my clients, right? So just a little light touch there, nothing too crazy. Maybe we even take the highlights down a little bit further, maybe even the whites to kind of fix the shirt. Something just quick like that. So 2 little adjustments just really kind of quickly burn down the background. Doesn't do a real great job, right? There's a little bit of a haloing going on there, I'm not going to lie. It could be a little bit better, but you know, it gets my, we can take that down to there. But this is something that we could apply in a preset, right? So I think all that's pretty straightforward. Toggle this on and off. That's about where our edit lands, right? So the next tool that I like to use, and something with the sky, would be the graduated filter, right? So if we jump into an image here, let's just jump into kind of a classic pose here, you know, something where they're kind of looking straight back at the camera, right? So in develop mode, if I hit the M key, this is going to take me into my graduated filter. So graduated filter is going to drag down from top to bottom, depending on which way I pull the cursor. But what this does is you can see immediately I've done some tweaks to this where it's only affecting the sky, right? How do I do that? Well, I can use this eyedropper here to only choose those highlight tones, right? And then I can show my luminance mask here, and it's going to include all of these additional areas. So then I can also, you know, adjust the range, and the red is, if I take that more to the left, it's going to bring in more of those dark tones. But what we want to happen is only have the highlights affected. And so something like this is I drop exposures. As you see, I brought highlights down. Let's turn that off. So we can see before and after, right? I brought all that tree detail in just from tweaking my settings there. So it's a pretty cool effect. This is another image where you can kind of see before and after to bring some of that mood back into it. So those are those two tools, right? Radial filter and the graduated filter, which work out real well. So let's jump into Photoshop to look at how that workflow is set up and how my dodge and burn technique will help you automate some of this, you know, a little more clunkier tools, these clunkier tools in Lightroom. All right, so to get our images into Photoshop, I like to use the Edit In feature right inside of Lightroom. So if I right click, I go to Edit In, and it's going to let me take this image right into Photoshop. What's important about this workflow is once it opens it up into Photoshop, it's going to save this edit back into my catalog, right? So that little step to not have to re-import the files is all the difference in saving time. So what it's going to do is it's going to open up my file directly into Photoshop, and we can get started. So the first thing I want to do is I want to build an action. Building an action is important because we can use this repeatedly for images in the future, right? So it's something that we can apply adjustments automatically to every image. And so you might be thinking, well, masking is going to be involved. What's going to happen there? We'll get through that in just a sec, of course, but I want to show you a real quick technique on how I like to use this dodge and burn technique. Burn down the background, dodge the clients, but give you this really good kind of push-pull technique. So first things first, we need to go in here and we need to save an action. So I'm going to save it in my workflow. I'm going to hit plus, and I am going to call this DNB1. Record. All right. So what we need to do is we need to select subjects here. So we're going to go to subject select. It's immediately going to select our couple here. So what I also need to do is I need to invert my selection. So Shift Command I is going to select everything but them, okay? So now we need to make, right? We don't want to do any adjustments on our background layer. That's a destructive way of editing, and it's definitely a Photoshop no-no. So we want to go here to curves, and what we're going to do is we're going to drop this down to burn down the background, right? Kind of get something dark and moody there, right? Just something quick. Now that we've already got this selection done, I can do add mask to selection, invert it again, create a curves layer, and we can lift it up. And it's that little subtlety, right? We're going from here to here, immediately has that applied, right? So if I want to apply a few other actions as well in this while it's recording, of course I can, right? White recovery, sure. I would just have it apply. I wouldn't mask in anything on that, of course, but it would be worth applying on that as well. And maybe if I wanted to do, portraiture, but we'll leave that off here for now. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit stop. I'll remove these and just show you real quick how simple this is. So now that we have our dodge and burn one, it's going to do load selection, which is fine. Okay. Now, we can turn off, let's see, set adjustment layer, show background. I am going to get rid of these two. We don't need those, of course. Perfect. So now that we have that set up in our action, right, we can apply it to multiple images at once. So that little technique there allows us to save these adjustments, and since we can save this image, quit Photoshop, this is what I like. Now our image comes right back into Lightroom, no problem. And these are all the various ones that we have here, right, from left to right. All right, so now we're ready for the Lightroom and Photoshop workflow. So first thing we need to do is go into Photoshop, and we have to create a droplet. Now, this droplet's going to be important for us because if we want to work from a Lightroom export, we're going to have to save a droplet. So, what I would do in this situation is choose for it to save in my Adobe folder where all of my droplets are, and we will just call this Dodge and Burn. Let's see, new, because I've saved it a few times. And we'll choose the darken background. I have a few different ones that I made here, but there was a pop-up here for that selection and inverse, so we'll go ahead and do the darken background here. Do save and close so it doesn't leave them open. Override save as action is good to go. Go ahead and click OK. Now we go back into Lightroom, and if we want to export our raw files that we have selected here, let's go by file type. And if we want to, let's make sure all of our radio filters are gone. That's fine. We'll do reset that. And we will sync those so that way all those are restarted. So select all, export. Now what's important, that's okay. What's important is that we set up our export right. So what we have to do is we have to make sure file settings, we will save those as PSDs, that's fine. I'll set that to 8-bit. I don't want resizing on. 300's good. Now, here's the important part. We want to make sure to go and choose that droplet we just saved. We want that to be a part of our export preset. So we'll go in here to Adobe, droplets, and this new one that we made there. All of those settings look good. We will set this as a new preset. So we'll just call this DNB new. Perfect. And then I will set the subfolder for where these need to go. We can put this actually in the originals, same as originals folder. So we can update this, right click. Now hit done. We don't have to figure out what folder they go into every time. We can just right click, export, Dodge and Burn new. And we'll go ahead and hit continue. Obviously I don't have some of the raws connected, which is okay. But what we can do is right click on this, show in Finder. Well, I guess we'd have to have one that I have in here. Let's see, show in Finder for this one. There we go. So you'll see that the PSDs will show right up in here as well. So all we have to do is go back into Lightroom, and re-import. So our PSDs come back in. Now there's another technique that you can use, which is a little bit better in terms of total workflow, is we can use the edit in feature on multiple images, and you can apply a batch in Photoshop for that same action. So that way you can make tweaks in real time to each of these photos versus re-importing them in and opening them back up. Kind of gets clunky. So if I wanted to do that same thing, I'd go to Raw, select these, right click, see if it'll let me do edit in. Unless it's only going to let me do it with the photos that I have originals for. Probably will. So Let's see which of these I have originals for. So I can only do it for these 4. So that's important to point out. We're going to open up all 4 of these into Photoshop, and we will apply that same darken background action, but we can apply it as a batch. So let's jump into Photoshop. Now that all of our images are open, we'll go to File, Automate, Batch, and we can choose this. Now, with none open, it's going to leave them all open. If I do Save and Close, obviously it's going to do that. So we choose Open Files, perfect. So we'll just run that to all these pictures. And what's nice about this is you can make tweaks to it before you save it and it goes back into Lightroom. But it going back into Lightroom is the big part of that workflow. You don't have to re-import again. So I think that that works a lot better and faster. So if I wanted to apply another action on top of this, like for instance, like a nice warmer style, let's go to my creatives, let's do a ooh, that looks a little crazy. If I want to do something, let's see, warm matte. Doesn't look too bad. So I can apply something like that. I can go to my next image. Let's see this, what this kind of did. You know, if I wanted to push the lighten a little bit more, right? I have the ability to do that. If I wanted to darken down, I can do another, right? Apply another kind of action in here. Maybe I like, right? Kind of go down the line, do the same thing. Yep, I like that action, sure. This one here, I might want to do something a little more neutral. Those blues really popped out there, didn't they? Let's take that out. Let's first mess with our background a little bit. We can bring that down a little bit further. And we can leave that alone. We can apply a profile on top of that too if we want. So let's kind of take all these for what they are. This one's a bit cool, but we can mess with that later. And we can File, Close All. And of course, we want to save. So once it saves all the documents, our new TIFF files will populate right into Lightroom. Just like this, right? So we have these new variations of our image and different ways to do it. So here are the results. So solid workflow allows me to deliver on the things that matter, right? It's not so much how I get there. It's not so much what tools I'm using, but it's the fact that my workflow is actually working, right? So it doesn't matter how busy I get, I can deliver on this for my clients. I'm using Lightroom, using Photoshop, profiles, presets, actions in Photoshop, all these things, right? We use them. We've heard these tools. Okay, yeah, I get it. But how do they all come together, right? I'm hoping there's some aha moments for you here. So using Lightroom and Photoshop, I can batch multiple images. With Lightroom, it starts with presets and profiles, syncing settings. In Photoshop, right, this dodge and burn technique, I really like the way that it turns out. It makes my images look, right? I can take an image from here to here pretty quickly. I mean, that's pretty insane, the difference on those. And the majority of the work is done with an action. So I'm hoping that that all makes sense and building your own action with that dodge and burn technique. Some of you might not like this subject select. It's not a great tool, right? It's not perfect in any sense. It's gonna miss some areas. Like we can even see here, it's missing these acute angles. That's okay. You can go in and paint that out. The difference between the collar. When you're looking at this image in digital and online, you're not seeing any of that stuff. That's not something that you're pointing out to and seeing any problems with those edits. I mean, yeah, it's not perfect, but it's good enough. So I think end of the day, you want to offer quick edits. Try this out, right? Take some of the techniques that you've learned here, put them into your workflow, and get images back to your clients faster. Above all, right, just learn something new. It's always good to take these tools to another level. So you got this. Try some stuff out. Thanks for tuning in, guys.